Welcome everyone that's joined so far to the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Intermax User Group webinar. It's Wednesday, September 28th, and we have I think a good webinar today, pretty informative. We'll go ahead and get started. Again, just want to welcome everyone. Want to welcome the staff from STS. We have Carol Crone, the Director of the STS National Databases, and Leanne Jones, the National Database Manager for the General Thoracic Surgery Database and Congenital. Thank you two for joining today. And also want to welcome the Intermax Data Warehouse staff. We have Patricia Potter, who I know many of y'all have worked with and know. She is the quality nurse in the nursing informatics at the Intermax Data Warehouse. John Pennington, the Senior Data Manager. Maceo Cleget, I know many of y'all have worked with him. He's our Clinical Data Analyst, and he works a lot with sites in the reports. And Chase Linderman may be joining. I'm not sure if he's logged on yet. And Jeannie and Love, who's the Patient Management Director at the Intermax Data Warehouse, who's also, I think, most of y'all know from transfers and back in the regulatory days and patient questions. So I think today we have a really good agenda. We're going to be discussing the ProTek Duo cannula, the implant discharge form, and RVADs when the interim, the appropriate timing. So welcome. Glad everyone's joining. I'm going to briefly go over AQO. So AQO is our meeting for the data managers. It's the advances in quality and outcomes, and it is a data managers meeting. It is geared toward the data managers. The dates for are October 26th through the 28th of 2022, and it's in Providence, Rhode Island this year. The Intermax day is October 26th. And we'll be discussing Intermax and PDMax that day. I believe we have early bird registration, but that is already closed. So we're to the standard registration, and all this information is on the sts.org website. So you can find it, you can look that up also there if you just search AQO 2022. For the Intermax day, we do have, you can attend it in person, which I'd highly recommend this year, although understand about hospitals and travel and all that. But there is also a virtual pass that attendees can also buy that. This is just a brief overview for what's going to be discussed for the Intermax and PDMax program. The topics, we're going to launch the PDMax dashboard and Kaplan-Meier tool. Also, we'll have discussions regarding utilizing the Intermax dashboard. We have a really good talk and case scenarios on right heart failure. There'll be discussions regarding the quality of life and long-term outcomes and compliance. We'll have a really good interactive discussion on how to read the quarterly reports. We'll have a version upgrade to PDMax, and we'll go over those changes on the 26th. Also, there will be a few discussions regarding ongoing research for Intermax and PDMax, future quality initiatives presentation, and we'll have many case scenarios for Intermax and PDMax, and also have a discussion regarding data completeness. So I think it's going to be a great meeting this year. You have, I believe, the rooms have been extended until, is it October 18th, I believe, but to get the special rate. So go ahead and search sts.org, and you can enter or go to sts.org and search 2022 AQO, and you'll find all this information there. So again, we're still allowing for the COVID-19 updates. Televisits are encouraged for those patients that it's in their best interest not to come to clinic. You may do the quality of life surveys over the phone or by mail, and we have extended the follow-up visit windows. So if they're done out of the window, please enter the last date of the follow-up date visit into the database. And we have, sites have 30 days after the follow-up window due date to enter the data for the COVID-19 exception. We have our contact information. Most of y'all know our contact information. We also have many resources. We have the STS National Database webpage, the Intermax and PDMax webpage. We have a special link to the reports page. We've also included the updated participant contact form and the data quality report validation form. And all these, just a reminder, all these slides will be posted by the end of the week on the sts.org website. Just to let you know, the upcoming Intermax webinars, the next user group webinar will be in November. It'll be November 30th at 1 p.m. Central Time. We will not have a user group webinar in October because we will be at AQO, and I hope to see many of y'all at AQO. But we do have a Intermax, our reporting webinar will still be scheduled for October 20th at 2 p.m. Central Time. So we will have that. That is October 20th at 2 p.m. Central. And that will be when Ryan and the reporting team go over the all the reports. And this is your opportunity to ask the reporting team any questions that you have regarding the reports, or if you have any requests on how they can improve those reports. So we can, just to let you know, today it is open discussion. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. We will answer as many questions as possible, and we encourage your feedback, and we want to hear from you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and start regarding the ProTek Duo. So the ProTek Duo is a cannula, not a device. If a ProTek Duo cannula is utilized, then you need to enter the device that it's connected to. It's most commonly connected to a centromag or a tandem heart. So I do just want to let everyone know, I know there's been some discrepancy in entering this. These guidelines are coming straight from the Intermax task force. So if you're sitting there wondering, well, I've been told to enter it into Intermax, so what are we going to do now? Don't worry. We are working on a plan to have this corrected. We are trying to get we will find all the ProTek Duos that have been entered into the database. And so we will most likely be contacting, Patricia and I will be contacting sites and having you just make the correction. So we'll streamline this and we'll make it as easy. Apologize for that. I have a border collie puppy. We will make this as easy for you and convenient as possible. So just stay tuned. This is something that we're in the process of working on, and we'll send, again, Patricia and I will send out an email and contact you with specific instructions. So I'm sure we'll may be having questions regarding that. And again, if you do have any questions, enter them in the Q&A box. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead, and Patricia, do you want to go ahead? I'll stop sharing and you can go ahead and start sharing your screen regarding what you wanted to display today.
Thanks, Catherine. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to go over the implant discharge form. I know I periodically reach out and, ask that the implant discharge form is completed. So I just wanted to kind of go over it and just go through two different scenarios with everybody, just as a little bit of a refresher. So just so you know, this is a training site. There's no PHI here. This is a made-up patient, so no worries there. Okay, so this is a patient that was implanted with a HeartMate 3 on 10/10/2021. They had their 1 week inpatient follow-up, and then they were discharged from the hospital on 10/31/2021. So once the patient has been discharged from the hospital, you'll come in, you'll complete this form. So in this case, this patient was discharged alive with a device in place. So they were discharged from the hospital with their HeartMate 3 to home. So if you click on this drop down, there's different scenarios that may apply to this question. So the first one is they were discharged alive with their HeartMate 3 in place. They died during their implant hospitalization. So they didn't make it out of the hospital with their HeartMate 3, or they were transplanted during this implant hospitalization. So they were never discharged from the hospital. While they were there for the implant, they were transplanted, or they were explanted due to recovery during the implant hospitalization. So they were explanted, device taken out. They had never been discharged with the device. And then the last one was the patient had a device exchange. So they could have had a HeartMate 3 to a HeartMate 3 exchange. So in this case, the patient was discharged alive on 10/31. You put in your ICU days, your intermediate step down days, and then just go through here and select any interventions that may have applied during their implant hospitalization. I will say here, if they weren't discharged alive, say they died during their implant hospitalization, the discharge date here would be the date that they passed away. So that date is their endpoint in Intermax. So if they do die, their death date is their implant discharge date for Intermax. So that is one scenario. Another scenario that comes up, and I think that this may be a little bit confusing, is here's another patient. Again, this is just a test patient. This patient was implanted with HeartMate 3 on 7/18/2022. They had their 1 week follow-up, and they were then transplanted on 8/17/2022. So the explant form was completed. They were transplanted, so 8/17/2022 for explant, and also 8/17/2022 for their transplant. So that has been entered. So now you've explanted your HeartMate 3, but you still need to complete the implant discharge form. And here it is here. So in this scenario, so the patient was not discharged alive with their device in place. They were transplanted during that implant hospitalization on 8/17/2022. So the date on this implant discharge form is the date of their transplant. It's not the date that they were discharged from the hospital from their transplant. It's the date that they had their transplant. And so the ICU days, the intermediate step down care days, all of that, those days are only applicable to the days leading up to the transplant. So anything post-transplant, ICU days, step down days, none of that applies. Once the patient is transplanted, that ends their time in Intermax, and we don't continue to follow the patient after. So if anybody has any questions on that, you're welcome to ask me. If you would rather send an email, feel free to reach out. But the main point here is that in this scenario, the discharge date is the date of the transplant, not the date that they were discharged from the hospital from their transplant. I hope that makes sense. And then lastly, I just did want to touch briefly, I'm not going to go too in depth on right heart failure, because we're having a really great in-depth right heart failure talk at AQO, and there'll be lots of time for question and answer for that. But I did have this come up a couple times in the past few weeks, so I just did want to mention it. So if your patient meets the right heart failure definition and meets the early post-implant right heart failure definition and received a temporary or durable RVAD within 30 days, yes, you do need to complete the right heart failure form, because by having that temporary RVAD, placed does meet the right heart failure definition, but you also need to add the device into Intermacs. So completing the right heart failure form isn't all you need to do. You also do need to add that device into Intermacs, even if it wasn't placed at the same time as the LVAD. So it wasn't a BiVAD implant. It was just, they had their, say their HeartMate 3 or their HVAD put in, and then within, and then a few weeks later had an RVAD placed. You do need to add that. So you would enter the right heart failure form, and then you would click here. Well, I won't be able to do it because this patient is endpointed, they're transplanted. You would click add new device, and it would give you the option to add an RVAD, and you would implant that. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. If anybody has any questions about any of that, I'm happy to answer it. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Appreciate that. If a patient is hospitalized for an exchange, should we use the exchange information from the drop-down list on the implant discharge form?
So, okay, so if a patient was hospitalized for an exchange, Deborah, are you saying they're still in the hospital from their initial implant? No, new hospitalization. Okay. So, so new hospitalization. Okay. So the patient was implanted and then they were discharged from the hospital. So you would, on the implant discharge form, you would select that they were discharged from the hospital alive with the device. When they come back in for the exchange, you will add in the new device, and that device will have a new implant discharge form.
Thanks, Patricia. Yep. So the next question, are you able to identify patients that meet that criteria but have not been captured correctly? Referring to right heart failure had temporary RVAD but was not added.
Yeah, Tandra, I think we can, John, you might be able to speak to this better, but we can include that possibly on an integrity check, and we can identify those if those patients are out there. We can contact the sites and ask that the RVADs are entered.
Yeah, you and I can look at that with an integrity check.
Yeah, so Tandra, if we do look at that with an integrity check, I will be in touch if your site has any of those patients that meet that criteria, get those devices added.
Great, thanks, Patricia and John. And then Patricia, Deborah responded back, yes, but what do we select from the drop-down list?
Okay, so if the patient was discharged with their device, so for device number 1, you would select patient was discharged alive with the device in place. They came back for a second rehospitalization for an exchange. Assuming that they leave the hospital alive with that device, you would select patient because what the question is asking is, what is the status of the patient at discharge from this device? So assuming from the exchange they are discharged alive, you would select that. But if they stay in the hospital and they receive another device, that's when you would select that the patient had a device exchange.
Right, I know, and sometimes, and I understand some, it is a little confusing. The name of the form's implant discharge form, but it's regarding the, implanting of the device. So it's basically when they're discharged from that implant from the hospital, if they are discharged. And like Patricia said, sometimes while they're when they get their device implanted during that hospital stay, unfortunately, things can happen, such as the patient passes away during that implant hospitalization and never goes home, or they're transplanted, which is a good thing, during that hospital stay, and then they're discharged, or you have to have an exchange, device exchange, or they recover. So there's many different scenarios, as y'all know, with these patients. So the implant discharge form is regarding that device implant hospitalization.
Looks like we have another one, Catherine, I can take, I think.
Okay.
All right, so Melissa is asking, what if a patient is hospitalized for implant, then discharged, but comes back due to a different condition and dies during that hospitalization. They are alive during the initial discharge from implant, but come back a couple months later and pass. What do we pick from the drop down for the implant discharge form? So you would select that. So the patient was implanted and then discharged. So speaking just to that admission, the patient was discharged alive. So you would select that the patient was discharged alive with the device in place. Now, when they come back and the patient dies during that hospitalization, you would, one, complete the rehospitalization form for that rehospitalization. And secondly, you would complete the death form if they passed away, or if if the device was turned off or something like that, you would complete the explant form. But just looking at this scenario, you would, one, complete the implant discharge form saying that they were discharged alive with the device in place. Then when they come back to the hospital, you'll complete the rehospitalization form, and then you'll complete the death form with the death date when the patient passes. Catherine did share contact information. So if something comes up after the webinar, you're always welcome to email me and ask any questions at that time too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another question. If a patient has a balloon pump placed in the OR during implant, where do you capture that? I believe there's oh, there you go. Thanks, Patricia. I think Patricia's going to show you where to capture that on the implant form. Should be, where's the removal? I think now we just have it under, when we made our upgrades, we just did it. They can just enter it under other, because there were not many balloon pumps entered during implant. Yeah, you'll just have to enter it there.
Yep, you can click on other specify and type it in here. Yep, that's perfect, Tiandra.
Yeah, thanks. So y'all are being quiet today, but just as Patricia mentioned, if you do have any questions, you can contact both of us, Patricia or myself, and we'll gladly answer your data entry questions. One more. As times go on, should comorbidities be documented if they are new, or should the same ones continue to be documented? As time goes on, should comorbidities be documented if they are new, or should the same ones continue to be documented? I would just, on the pre-implant form, obviously do the, capture all the code all the comorbidities, and then when you get to the follow-ups, I would just document the new ones, because we'll have those that you've documented previously.
Right. So if there's like a new diagnosis of something, say, that comes up on the 6th month, yes, enter it there, even though
Right.
it didn't apply a pre-implant.
Thanks, Patricia. Can you cover chronic infections, how they're to be entered as adverse events when it's the same type of infection? Yes, we can go over that.
Yep, and Tiandra, there's also going to be, I don't know if you're planning to attend the AQO sessions, but there is going to be a presentation on infections with opportunity for question and answer. So that will be coming.
Yes, that will be coming. And that's going to be a really great topic discussion, actually. But sure, for chronic infections, if it's chronic and a chronic ongoing infections, I can send you the little our hack, our cheat sheet for that. But basically, if you have, let's say you have a patient that has a chronic driveline infection and they, let's say it's, I'm just going to say staph. So if it's a chronic staph driveline infection, then there you get the first time the patient is seen or diagnosed with this, the infection presents itself, you're going to document it in the infection form, and you're going to put, you know, type of infection. Now we've added, you know, where you can say that it's staph and gram positive. So you would document the first time, like I said, it presents, and then let's say this occurs at 3 months. Patient comes back at the 6-month follow-up, it's the same, or let's say the patient comes back in a month, and, or no, let's go back to 6 months. They come back, they make it to the 6-month follow-up. They're clicking along, 6-month follow-up comes around. They still have this chronic staph driveline infection, and the patient's doing okay. Nothing's changed. Patient's still on the same antibiotics, treatment's the same. But let's say a month later, the patient has to be admitted to the hospital, and a new bug is growing, a new type of bacteria. So when you enter that rehospitalization and you choose major infection, that's what you're going to document. When you complete the infection form, you would document at that time, you know, the new bug. So you would complete a new infection form for that, for 2 reasons. 1, because the patient was rehospitalized for an infection, and 2, because a new bug started growing. So let's say it's a gram-negative bug now. So bottom line is, for chronic infections, you document it the first time it presents, and then the next time you would complete another infection form is going to be when there's a change to that. So it could be a change in treatment. If there's a change in treatment, such as a wound vac, let's say the patient had to have a wound vac for this chronic infection, or if they started growing another bug. So that's how you would document a chronic infection. You're not going to document at every follow-up, but the patient's just plugging along and living with this chronic staph driveline infection. You know, then you wouldn't even complete a new infection form until treatment's changed or a new bug has started growing. And Patricia, if I missed anything, let me know, or if you want to add anything.
I will say though, if they do have to come back to the hospital, and there's no change in treatment, there's no new bug, you don't need to enter another infection form, but you do need to enter another hospitalization form.
Right. There you go.
Driveline assessment is a physical assessment, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Not abnormal because still on antibiotics. Well, if the driveline does look abnormal, if you know there's drainage, discharge, redness, yes, that would be considered abnormal. When the bug stays the same, but the treatment changes, do you put the original infection date? So if the bug stays the same, but there's a change in treatment, you would enter a new major infection form because there is a change in the treatment.
Right. The onset date.
Oh, I would use the same onset date.
Yeah.
Use the date you had the positive. Do you use the original infection date? Yes, if it's the same. So if everything is the same and they are going, If it's a new bug, you would enter a new major infection form. Because it would be a new infection. Yes, with a new date. For that bug, yeah.
If going from PO to IV antibiotics, same bug.
So that's a change in the treatment. So you would need a new form.
Yes.
Back for admit. What do you put for that reason? So filling out the rehospitalization form, what would the reason be? Infection.
Mhm. Does that count towards an event under the infection reporting? Well, that's going to count, and Maceo, please add or correct me, but it's only going to, the first event's going to count. The ongoing is not going to count. Oh, but if they make any changes, Maceo. We couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to read the question.
Oh, sorry. So if they have an infection and then it is ongoing, but there's a change in the treatment or a change in the, if it's an ongoing infection and there is a change in treatment and they complete a new infection form, is that going to count as, is it a new event under
It would
infection?
count. Yeah, it would count as a new event. A new event. I'm sorry. Yes.
And Tandra, this is a really good question for the webinar October 20th with Ryan. If you have like an issue with this or want more details, I would, suggest your group to log on and discuss it more in depth. And Marie, if we have entered infection forms for each hospitalization, do we need to delete them?
If Marie, if there was, if it was, the same bug, the same treatment, nothing new, and it really doesn't meet a new infection criteria, then yes, I would remove them. And you can do that by just opening the forms back up and clicking on the major infection form. If you just click no and hit validate and submit, that will remove it. But if you have any trouble, you can reach out to me and I can remove them for you. But yeah, if it's not a new infection or not a new bug, no change in the treatment, then you don't need infection forms continually. But I can help you, so you can email me if you need help removing them. And then Tandra has a question for Maceo. Maceo, can we connect to cover events, patients for infection for quarterly reporting? I have a question regarding page 64.
Of course. After the call, I will send an invite to set up that meeting.
Thanks, Maceo.
No problem.
And I did want to just mention this. You can also look at all of your AEs utilizing the live data download option. You can look at all your data that way too, which that's a really good tool.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I think, we got some more questions. Good. I think those only show 30 days. Okay, you're talking about the event.
Dashboard. Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's the dashboard, Tandra,
Yeah.
but the live data download should be everything that's been entered at your site. John, is that right? Did I say that wrong?
No, the live data download is if she goes in and edits a form right now and saves it and goes and looks, it will reflect that.
And all the historic data that's been entered, right?
Yeah. So it's everything historic plus up to the minute changes.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank everyone for logging on today and joining the webinar. Hopefully you have learned something that you can take back to your team. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email Patricia and I. And just a reminder, the next webinar will be October 20th, and it's the reporting webinar, and those are always really good webinars. I highly encourage everyone to attend those because you get Dr. Ryan Cantor's attention for about an hour, which is pretty rare. You can ask him anything. So, and again, for suggestions to improve those reports. I want to send a thank you to Carol and Leanne for joining today and for their support. And thanks again to Patricia for presenting today, and for the Maceo, John, and Jeannie Ann who logged on from the Intermax data warehouse. So again, email us if you have any questions, and we will talk to y'all next month for the reporting webinar. Hope everyone has a good day.